Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another chapter of Experiencer Interviews. And today we've got another amazing soul coming to us from the US. We have Eve Lorgen on board today. Eve Lorgen is the author of the books The Love Bite, Alien Interference in Human Love Relationships, and The Dark Side of Cupid, Love Affairs, the Supernatural, and Energy Vampirism. She is a hypnotherapist, researcher in alien abductions, near-death experiences, shamanic initiations, military abductions, mind control, spiritual warfare, psychic attacks, and cult involvement. Early on in her career, counseling alien abductees, she discovered a plethora of unusual experiences that often accompanied those who reported alien encounters and milabs. The issue of mind control is central, and it is her belief that aliens are the mastermind controllers behind secret government, human agencies, and black projects. The most prominent aspect of Eve's consulting and support is with those who are experiencing some form of paranormal orchestrated love relationships, or what she calls the love bite. So, Eve, thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thank you for having me today, and it's a pleasure. So,
Uh, Thank you.
because
Uh,
I'm not sure how to start, quote, as an experiencer, or maybe say former experiencer, but then sometimes this stuff really never goes away fully, or our awareness of it shifts and deepens. So that's what I'll say.
um, well, your name tends to pop up a lot on my show because of uh, some of my past guests who went through similar experiences regarding the love bite. And a few shows ago, Ella Bain told me that you were also an experiencer. So I was hoping to get into as much as we can into your story today, and possibly get into other questions regarding your book and your work. So as my first question, when did your otherworldly or supernatural experiences start off for you?
Well, I think in hindsight, my awareness of them didn't really take I didn't really think I had anything I think the earliest were probably when I was really young, but let's say 11 years old was like a major type of memory that I thought was like I don't know, a lucid dream. And then that was the one that really popped out as a significant event, but they actually, many of them happened later in life, including when they take a pregnancy, like and you know when they're coming, you get those feelings, and then my awareness of them became more apparent, but they were always kind of within a dreamlike state or a lucid dream state, and there was still a lot of amnesia of like what really happened early in life that kind of set the stage for what I later learned I had to piece together like a puzzle. And I'm still piecing together a lot of my own life in terms of very early experiences that really confirmed that these things really happened, and they were not only out of the body experiences or otherworldly and other dimensional, but they were also very physical and did physical things, including, I think, surgeries and taking pregnancies and that kind of thing. So I think it's definitely physical and a lot of other dimensional, for lack of a better way of understanding it, including, taking you out of the body and doing things and God, you know. But initially, I think when I look back, I mean, I have to do everything in hindsight as an adult later, and looking at my way of understanding things comes from, let's say, a therapist's perspective of how do we understand family systems, because that was my master's, counseling, psychology, and marriage and family systems. This was after my first degree in biochemistry, where I did that for like 7.5 years, and then didn't want to do that anymore, got poisoned on the job, and then studied Oriental medicine because I really like understanding different ways of how medicine works on the East and West, allopathic plus, Oriental medicine and holism. Anyway, long story short, so through my lens of trying to perceive what's going on in alien abductions, because I knew it happened to me. Let's just face it, it happened to me and my family. And then these other people that I started meeting, probably, when Bud Hopkins material really started coming out more popularly, and I think it was several of his books that awakened me to like, uh-oh, these things happened to me and they weren't just dreams. I'm like, oh, that same thing happened to me. But I didn't have the profound what I felt was physical evidence, and the profound missing time that you saw was in these early reports of, the cars going down the road, like the Betty and Barney Hill story, or the Travis Walton stuff, or even those who had, big pieces of missing time and waking up with marks. And I didn't have the dramatic stuff that some of these other things had. So I thought, oh, well, maybe it's not that. Maybe, what I was hoping to believe based on my family system. Okay, so here I going into understanding the family system and what I was conditioned to believe about, let's say, the ETs, through a type of, I'm going to call it a type of cult family system belief that kind of developed out of the early 50s contactees movement with people who were close to my parents. So it wasn't necessarily family members, but it was someone who was a genuine trance medium who appeared to have connections with benevolent ETs. And so this was like early 50s, right? Before a lot of these things even became known, and even in the contactee literature. So so we were raised to kind of believe, oh, well, maybe these are the positive ETs that are interacting with humanity. But there was also an awareness that, oh, there were some bad ones too, and they were fighting. A lot of times they were fighting with one another, and that were some who were being taken and abducted under some kind of government oversight that happened. Actually, it was also during the Kennedy administration, what we were told in these channelings in my family system. And I usually don't talk about this because I'm kind of like anti-channeling now based on what I've learned and experienced. Like, so I had to really question everything based on the recognition of what I'll call internal conflict of trauma. I want to believe one thing, that, oh, they're these benevolent beings that I'm in contact with all my life, and maybe I'm one of them or part of them or a hybrid of some sort, right? And then the other side of the coin was that there was some real dysfunctional family dynamics that was like pretty bad. There was a Freemasonry thing, there was surveillance, there was like just bad stuff, which is complex family trauma and serious narcissistic abuse that included some of these others that were channelers that were influencing my family system in the beliefs of positive ETs. But underneath it, like I knew I had abductions, but I was never able to really talk about it. Like, hey, what about this? But it never talked about, was never shared, but it was, let's say, implied. Oh, well, it must be, your positive connection to these ETs, and they're seeding your dreams, and they're connecting with you, and they blah, 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 blah. So, but really, there was abductions going on with medical experimentation and trauma, and it took advantage of family system trauma that created. I think it's manipulated first by the beings who work through a family system from, let's say, ancestral lines that go further back than your mother and father. And then those dynamics are kind of manipulated. So there's always a traumatic narcissistic abuse system which maintains this chaos and dissociations. So you can't really heal until you get out of that family system and really choose to heal and start working on the trauma stuff. And then unveiling what was the alien aspect of this, and what's the family part of this that's just normal dysfunctional family stuff. Okay, so I had to untangle all of that as I got my master's degree and I started learning about these things. And in the 90s, when I got my master's degree, which is kind of, even in those days, we didn't have a thorough understanding of not only the alien abduction phenomena, it was like still really young. And so I did this because I wanted to work with abductees, learn what's happening, and start working within the psychological framework to address the realities that people can get hypnotherapy and trauma work on these things and being addressed. These things are real. They're not a figment of our imagination. They are not mentally ill. These things are happening, and we need to have a subset of mental health professionals who actually can help these people and just kind of at least work with them to acknowledge and that these things are real. These things happen and they continue to happen. You can't just take a drug and like, oh, they're going to go away. You take an antidepressant or some antipsychotic, it's like, oh. So I learned so much just working with people and then sharing my own experiences and trying to like, oh, wait a minute, that really was an abduction, but then there was so much amnesia and there was night terrors. So I'm not sure how to say which things came first. It was just more of realization through time that these things happened in the past and that I was helped along the way in my study of, let's say, complex trauma recovery. That's what the terms we use now. But in the old days, we learned, oh, addictions and alcoholism and co-alcoholism and learning about abuse and dissociation. And like in the old days, they called it multiple personality disorder. And now we just call it DID or dissociative tendencies that happen as a result of severe trauma, usually in early ages, or let's say it starts from early childhood until 6 years old, where you can get the real deep splits of complete amnesia of deep trauma. So there's different kinds of trauma and dissociation, but abductions, I think that in the early research, they thought, oh, well, maybe it only, your first memory was, oh, maybe you're 4 years old or 6 years old or when you're 12, or it only happened once when you were, an adult on this road trip, blah, 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 or an opportunistic abduction. But most people have had these their whole life. And I believe it happens even younger than like 4 years old. And according to the research with people that I've corresponded with, like Dr. Corrado Malanga of Italy, who's like a PhD organic chemistry, alien abduction research. And he's actually the one who's been doing a lot of the pyramid research where they found all that deep energy structure, suspected ancient technology. So he's like super duper smart. But in his understanding, through working with abductees and hypnotic regressions, so I just want to, long story short, he came to find that, wait a minute, this happens within the first 6 days of life. So, of course, people don't remember like the first 6 days of life, maybe unless you do a regression and you have these like memories that come back. And even actually did a movie on this that was produced in Italy, first in Italian called 6 Days. And then they did get this in English and sold it over to some companies, but it never really got wide exposure, I think, in America or in the English-speaking countries. And it was a really good movie because it showed a lot of the things that came up in his research and kind of a collective drama, or it was more of a drama than a docudrama of an abduction case. So anyway, I believe now in hindsight, based on how we know the modus operandi of certain of these beings, which I believe are the subset of them, which are, I'm calling vampiristic or controlling, that want to use us as hosts to live through us and live their agenda through us and harvest us for their own purposes. Let's say those beings would want to insert themselves in our consciousness or even our bodies in some way to intercept the direct connect you get with eternal spirit, which Malanga called anima. Okay, so the way to find out the truth and reconnect with anima, which is eternal spirit, which I think is connected to, if we can connect that to Christ and Christ helping us to connect, then we can perceive more clearly what's going on, and they make a more direct communication between a holistic, integrated modality of being. Okay, so anyways, being an abductee all your life and you've been in a dysfunctional family, duh, you're going to have dissociation up the ass, okay? Put it bluntly. I know we're getting an interruption, but anyway, so learning dissociation and direct connection of communication. So that's a therapeutic process that really goes above and beyond one hypnotherapy regression, but that can be numerous forms of how do we reconnect with the internal truth that knows exactly what happened to us with respect to these beings, and that we make a deep connection to our own eternal spirit and the spirit of truth, that instead of listening to them, oh, they're your guides, they're your protectors, they're this, they're that. No, let's go direct connect to God and our eternal spirit, which through Christ is more powerful in my view. Then we can get to the truth of, wait a minute, well, what are they doing and how are they doing it? And did they tell me the truth? And well, let's just test their narratives here. So to get back to the story of what I started doing with James Bartley, for example. He's my colleague who lives in Australia now, but we lived in San Diego County, and we started working along with some colleagues that I went to college with, where we kind of started this support group thing where we wanted to talk to other abductees and experiencers who've had related experiences, but maybe they didn't quite know what it was. They thought maybe it was just a near-death thing, or a military abduction, or a near-death experience, or remote viewing on Mars, or whatever, right? So we came to learn these things, and very much resonated with the work of the late Dr. Carla Turner, and also Jacques Vallée, because really Jacques Vallée brought a lot of stuff into the arena that Barbara Bartholic worked with, who worked with Carla Turner to reveal these deeper milab and alien abductions and reptilians and the love bite, right? So we were like, yeah, yeah, that happened to me. And I had that memory and that whole underground base stuff, and the military came and reptilians and this and that. And then we would talk to people who also had these things. So it wasn't the cut and dry narrative that was being told by ones who only had ET experiences. So that started the process of, let's question, well, what are we being told? And what happens if we talk about this? And what happens if we expose that? And we expand the quote narrative of what people think this whole alien extraterrestrial thing is about, and include other elements, which include humans and human involvement on other more sophisticated levels. And so that brought in interference, right? And brought in interference through alien love bites, right? So once, this happened to me, and I only saw it in hindsight and in my own recovery process, where I was like, I knew I had these experiences, right? And I remembered some and fragments, but I wanted to know more. So I started practicing not only hypnotherapy and doing self-hypnosis, but then doing lucid dreaming practices. So when I started doing that, there was some pretty scary things that came up that suggested deep trauma that connected to night terrors that I had all my life, and I didn't know what that was about. So I had an experience. This actually relates to a particular type of alien, which is interesting. So let's say in the early 90s, before I had my son. So I'm a mother. Now he's 31, so I'm old now. But I was doing like lucid dreaming practices, and wanting to learn and still wanting to hold this, like, are they benevolent? But there's all this like trauma and like icky feelings and conflict and night terrors, and I just couldn't figure out, well, are they good? Are they bad? And I felt conflicted, right? Because really there was bad shit going on. And I didn't want to really see it. So what's interesting is that one night I had, I believe it was a visitation, which came as a alien helper of some sort. Okay. So I started having a night terror. And if you have ever had a night terror, they call it a parasomnia, which happens once you go to sleep and you start going through the different sleep stages of consciousness. And I think it happens before you go into delta. You go like alpha, well, first you're beta, alpha, theta, delta, rapid eye movement, and then there's some others. But usually before you go into REM, usually it's the theta delta state. Going into the deep sleep, what will happen is that you will have a sudden terror. It's really the trauma you're hitting in these stages. And then I would wake up in this like horrible trauma, like extreme fear and terror that had no name and no memory, but it was just physiologically just so terrifying that there was never a memory that I could connect it with. So there was no trigger really. So it would just happen, right? So anyway, during one of these night terrors, I started becoming more conscious because I was working on the lucid dreaming, And so I guess I was told by a being, it says, open your eyes and look. Like, so I was actually opening up my third eye inside my mind's eye during this, right before awakening. So I open up my mind's eye, and then I see an alien, which was a female alien who was a blue gray. So she was a blue gray with like the black classic eyes, but she had the feeling of almost like a distant wisdom. It didn't have a lot of love, compassion, softness, but it was, you need to see this. I'm going to show you this. This was revelatory of basically a deep trauma in infancy, which created I think, the origin of the night terror reactivity in my sleep and consciousness. And so as I became courageous and was, okay, open your eyes, look. So I saw this female alien gray, right? And so she was showing me, and then a part of myself awakened. And the part of myself that awakened was this infant part that split off, literally dissociation, a complete split of an infant part that was so despairing and so shocked and so terrified that it split off from the consciousness of my normal personality being. And that this part was a failure to thrive infant, that if it was allowed to retain the full feeling and memory of beingness because of the deep and severe trauma of my life at that time, it would have killed the body. Okay, in other words, it saved my life. So the dissociation had to occur to save my physical body, or the body would have died. Okay, and it would have been a failure to thrive infancy because this trauma was so severe. And so the trauma was only experienced as an infant would. So there would be no words. It's just this horrible feeling and of despair and shock. And I can't even describe it, but it would be from it's also a medical thing because I was a premature infant, and then I was horribly abused, even as an infant, not only medically, but in the hospital as a preemie in one of those incubators, but also as from my biological father, who was a horrible perpetrator. Okay, and that's the truth. So that was the responsibility. I mean, that was what happened. Okay, the early trauma split. So the trauma split held that in captivity or in a compartment until I was able to see it. So the alien being actually showed me. And then, as part of that whole experience, it happened kind of like throughout the night in this dream of feeling all this like despairing grief emotions through like muddy floodwaters. It was like the visual imagery. But it was actually the female alien being who showed me this is the cause of the night terrors. And so I was afraid to look at the alien eyes, and that created. But then I had the courage to see, and then I saw, okay, there was a split that occurred. So that helped me, and it wasn't a malevolent being that actually showed me this. It was just, okay, this is what you need to be aware of. And so that got me onto the track of let's learn about dissociation and trauma and what else might be hiding in the recesses of dissociation and amnesia. And it took decades because in the process of, okay, I'm going to search this out like a researcher. I mean, I was like, I was so dedicated. I wanted to find out the truth through every mechanism possible, including lucid dreaming, which actually helped. But it was also, I also had a stop and an interference. And one of the interference factors during this was, oh, guess what? The love bite setup. So during that time, like right after a lot of these things started coming up, suggesting much deeper trauma that suggested more than aliens. Okay. Then that was when, oh, there was the love bite setup, but I didn't know anything about it until, thank God, it was a miracle because knowing James Bartley and the people I was working with, and Dr. Carla Turner and Barbara Bartholick. And it was actually right after Dr. Carla Turner, actually, it was before she died. We went to a conference in 1995 in San Diego. And then that's how I met a lot of the local people in San Diego County who started becoming interested in the UFOs and the whole thing, right? There's just, the Bill Cooper stuff and all the early Montauk Project and all that. So I started learning and experimenting more with trying to get to memories. And so that's when the love bite setup happened. And then I started becoming like obsessed with this other person who happened to also be an abductee, who was actually involved also in research, but I can't mention names. And then, but luckily, because of Barbara Bartholick and our research and correspondence, we talked on the phone in those days because we didn't really have the internet as easily to talk. So we talked a lot on the phone, And she says, "Oh no, honey, this is the alien engineered love obsession. Just watch." And so she nursed me through this, and she nursed many of us through this. We were all having it, like four of us in the support group were having this love bite shit all at the same time. And then a lot of us had experiences together where we had shared dreams, right? But it was really shared abduction or shared astral dreamscape manipulation. And then some of us were becoming obsessed with each other and started to have like love bitey sexual things. And the aliens would do this on purpose, right? So we found out like years later, of course, that the reptilians in particular seem to be more focused on the sexual manipulation factor of feeding on the energy and ramping up the trauma and the unrequited love and the sexual energy and the crashing down and the unplugging, the psychic unplugging and manipulating the people around you, so you're pining away in unrequited love already in dysfunctional relationships that were set up through our conditioning and the family trauma, which was part of the setup. So see, this is where I probably differed from many other researchers where they thought, oh no, it's all the human military who are bad and it's your family system's bad. And the aliens didn't do that. But in reality, they've been watching us a lot longer than this whole Eisenhower thing and which people were in these secret projects. I mean, this has been going on for generations and generations, and they follow certain bloodlines. And then I believe they manipulate them according to what is their agenda, and then how they would farm a particular line and watch them or tweak them or use them or, modify their DNA for all we know. So that's how I discovered it. So I kind of discovered something more nefarious than really what I wanted to believe and what my family system was. It was what I call an operational cult system to handle us into a belief system that enabled the amnesia of the abductions and also the non-recognition and denial of abuse that happened within the family that involved sexual abuse and narcissistic abuse and alcoholism and Freemasonry and this supernatural occult secret society stuff. Okay, so that just blew everything out of the water when we started figuring out the connections with certain abductee programs, let's say, and the military involvement that we suspected was going on because there was both, and it wasn't one or the other. So, kind of got me into trouble and got me targeted too, right? I mean, targeted with love bites. So after I realized one love bite, and that was like a near-death experience for me because going through, I call it going through the death throes of the alien love bite, because I realized, it wakes you up. Let's just say it wakes you up to the reality of, oh, wow, there's all this trauma, and the conditioning of trauma will make us basically go from one dysfunctional family system to the next dysfunction, our recovery work and just like figure stuff out. And a lot of times it's not until you're a parent or even a grandparent before you realize the fullness of how it all kind of works together. Complicated. You know what I mean? So it's not simple and cut and dry. It is complicated. So unfortunately, that's why I became a therapist and decided to become more of a therapist from a trauma recovery mode of research, as opposed to the alien abduction researcher who, does this, that, and the other, and then has this narrative. But what we discovered and what I discovered with Barbie, thank God, that there was more deeper things happening outside of the prescribed narrative of what they say, well, this is what alien abduction is, and this is the research, and this is the science behind it. We only have to do science, and we can't look at all this other stuff that, oh my God, it unwound the whole Pandora's box of the whole deception behind trying to perceive it within a strictly scientific perspective, you know? So anyway, I'm going to pause because I know I said a mouthful. So is there anything else that you want to comment on or?
Yeah, well, you talked briefly about pregnancies. Did anything out of the ordinary happen to you, like a phantom pregnancy or whatever?
Yeah. well, I did get pregnant, and I think it happened more than once, to be honest. At least one in the 80s, which that was my reproductive years. And I knew it, and it was still pretty early on. Actually, it was only a month, because I only missed my period for maybe 3 weeks or something. So, and I knew it, and it was like one of those things where um, we used to call it the prodrome. And when abductees were like, oh, we know they're coming. We feel it before it happens, and we know they're coming, and we want to stay awake all night long because we know they're coming. So it was one of those. I knew I was pregnant, and I knew they were coming. And I didn't want to go to sleep because I knew they were coming. So I stayed awake like one night, pretty much almost all night long until about 5 in the morning, and where it was still dark. And I was at a full-time job in those days in the biochemistry realm. And and I tried my hardest to stay awake all night long until I started drifting off to sleep around 5 or 5:30 in the morning before I had to get up at like 6:30. So this all happened in a short period of time where there was a imposed perceptual, let's say a hypnotic visual thing that went into my consciousness that was by the aliens to look at the water. So it gave me this perception of putting your hand into water and feeling the water or the warmth of the water, making you relax and go into this like relaxed state to like, so that I wouldn't wake up physically. And so I did that because I was so dang tired, right? And then when I did that, I remember there was an alien that basically appeared in my perception, actually standing behind me. So it's kind of like, you're in your body, but so it's kind of like you're seeing through your third eye and you're seeing behind you. That's how I perceived it. And it was a type of alien gray, but I think it was a brown one, but it had those mantis legs that go backwards. But I perceived it as a smaller being that had the mantis-like legs. And then I was having an argument with this being about the pregnancy, and he was going to take it. And I said, no, you're not. And we were having a fight over it. And then they basically decided that they were going to take it anyway, and they did. And they said they only needed it. It's interesting because they said they only needed it after even a few weeks for their purposes. So they did take it. And then when I got up that morning, I had, horrible cramps and, like worse than a period for a woman, right? You know that they took it and you're having like horrible bleeding and yeah. And then, like what Dr. Carla Turner said in one of her famous lines in her books, they poke you, they prod you, they do this medical stuff on you, and they may take your pregnancies throughout the night, and you're sleep deprived. And what do you got to do? You got to get up and go to work. So after a half-hour sleep and stealing a pregnancy, after miscarrying and bleeding like hell and being completely sleep deprived, you gotta get up and go to work and pretend like everything's okay because gosh darn it, you can't tell the truth, can you? They'll think you're crazy. So that was one of them. And I think more what they call it when they do the egg harvesting thing. I believe that happened actually much earlier in my life. And I think in hindsight, for a woman anyway, like once you start your period, they know, okay, now you can have pregnancies once you start your period, and then they start interacting with you more. But they can take the eggs even earlier than that, and they could store them, and then they can cause you to become pregnant, grow it up in a outside of time thing, and then take you back in and out of time, so that your womb, you might have had a pregnancy where they took it in like in your perceived time, it's like, oh, you just had missing time during the night, or just, but that might have grown up for 3 months in another environment. So you know how they expand time and contract time, but your body will show it. And I can't say this for my body, but let's say for someone I know who was also an abductee without memory, who goes to a doctor, has never had children, has never gotten pregnant that she knew of, goes to a doctor, and the doctor says, "Oh, well, your cervix has proof that you've given birth." So these things happen. And then even medically, like it's so well hidden in amnesia until sometimes you find out accidentally medically, oh, how did this appear there? How did this implant appear there? And that looks like you've had a surgery. Well, who did that? So
Regarding the gray that came to you, do you see it as a form of healing or an intervention? Because it to me at least it seems that you grew stronger out of that.
Yes. No, I believe it was a helpful, that was a helpful intervention. And I've had actually, and this is where I veer from being really black and white about it, because there have been things that over time have helped me awaken. And then I've had beings come to me in different ways that weren't within the abduction mode of operation. For example, I had, let's say, a being that appeared to me while I was helping another survivor who was in a time travel project, who before he even went public, because we would talk until he went public, and he thought I was in the project too, and he remembered a lot, and I didn't remember, and but I think I was too in the same project, but it wasn't exactly the same. But the short end of it was, as he told me his story, I had a visitation by beings that had an appearance. So when they came, they would come to you during your, I don't even say it's a dream state. It's before you go into dreams and you can perceive visual imagery. And let's say the alpha state or the theta state, you know? So it was even before a dream, but then it would go into a dream. So it would go into a lucid dream kind of thing. And the being was, it appeared like, I think, how they describe Andromedans, but the being was, it was a male being, and he was bald, had a kind of a large head, maybe a regular head size, bipedal, large eyes, but they were blue. So they were the large blue eyes and bald and almost like a regular face, but a larger head, I think. And then this being telepathically, they show you their image to say, okay, this is me. This is like the communication. And then they give me almost like a video clip that's interactive with their presence of being to show me something. So he basically was showing me what happened with this person in this project and how it started out a certain way, and then it got hijacked by like a lot of reptilian stuff. And it showed me some things that were related to him and also me. And so the being, when I sensed his, it was a male presence, he had joy and love, and he had a sense of humor. So his very essence was joy and love. Okay, so this was a benevolent being. This wasn't fake. Okay, so and so when he showed me, oh, this is what happened. And so this was a little more detailed what happened in this person's life during his teen years, and then how the project actually kind of got hijacked from some of the originals that were involved that really didn't know the full extent of the darker malevolent aliens, like the reptilians in particular, probably Dracos too, but there was other humans involved, like, sub projects that they really didn't know. They really didn't know the full extent of the hijack of what happened. But anyway, so you're showing me this. And then after he finished the communication, he knew that I had a Boston Terrier dog at a particular time in my life. And so this was after I had that particular dog. And so I'm a Boston Terrier lover. Okay. I've had them all my life as pets. So I had a Boston Terrier earlier in life, long before this interaction, right, with the alien. And the Boston Terrier would play little mean jokes. So if we were gone for too many hours on our job or working, he would go and be bad and get in the kitchen and open up the bag of potatoes or the flour, make a huge mess, or get in the garbage. Or he would jump on the dinner table and take a shit on the dinner table and leave the shit on the dinner table. And he knew he wasn't supposed to do that, but he would do it on purpose to make me mad. So the alien knew, well, it's like he could scan my memories of things in my life. And so he wanted to show me, as a funny joke, that he understood that I loved my dog and my dog did funny little mean things. And so he showed me the incident of the little Boston Terrier shit on the table. But then he showed me like a whole table of Boston Terrier shits. And he was like laughing. And we were laughing together of this Boston Terrier, like, okay, I'm leaving now, but I want to show you that I have a sense of humor too, and I understand these things about you. And then so after the funny joke, so I left feeling happy, and it was a funny joke. And then when he signed off the communication, then he shows me his image again. Like, so it would be like, a Zoom, you see our video, we know who we're talking to, we see our image. And then the video clip, which is interactive with our souls and like a dream. And then when they sign off, then they sign off with their image, and it's like goodbye. And then he left. So that was how I interacted with a different type. But the types that were benevolent, they wouldn't happen necessarily regularly when I wanted to or when I called on them. And even when I had true angelic intervention in my life, which I did in a very profound way, more than once, they didn't happen just because I wanted them to. I mean, I prayed in a particular circumstance, which I kind of launch off into another benevolent angelic intervention, which happened as a result of when I would talk to other experiencers who happened to be in secret, what we call unacknowledged special access projects that involved blah, 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 that are secret. And so, oops, you talk about something that was considered, you breached security, now you're in trouble, now you're going to die, okay, that kind of thing. So, like experiencers, when we know they're coming, when we know we're being threatened, okay, you're in trouble, we're going to come and get you and we're going to kill you. So that was the feeling of we breached security, okay, in a particular interaction that was being monitored and now could be seen by some other party, which is considered danger, right? So this kind of thing would happen a lot in my early days talking to people, and they're just like, oh, this memory and that memory, and then oops, security breach. So anyway, long story short, I'm praying because I'm scared for my life. And I'm home alone, or I think my son is with me, but my ex was probably out of town, and it wouldn't matter if he was there or not. When your life is threatened, it doesn't matter. Nobody can protect you except God or Jesus, right? So I'm praying to Jesus Christ, please, send help, protect me. I know my life is being threatened right now. And so, like you can't go to sleep because you're so scared you're going to be killed. Okay, so I was scared, didn't sleep until just at a moment where you're starting to relax. Well, an angel came. Okay, so a very, very tall angel came and came through the doorway inside my bedroom. He had to duck, right? So he's so tall. So he's above the height of the doorway. He's ducking to come down, very tall, slender, wearing a white, kind of like a white tunic cloak. I only saw the first part of his body, and it was short-sleeved white shirt, but it was a male angel that had female energy in him that was very loving and compassionate, and it was a comforting angel that was love and comfort, male, but also female essence of comfort. So that male comforting angel came, and he actually came and laid beside me on the bed on the right side, and he laid down with me and helped me fall asleep with him to be safe. So he actually laid down with me until I fell asleep to help keep me safe. And he did come in Jesus Christ's name. And so the person that I was talking to, who we breached security, right? We were both milab stuff. I prayed for him too, because obviously he was in danger also. Okay. He was across the country, right? And I said, oh, did you have an experience too? Because I prayed in Jesus Christ's name because I knew that, we were in trouble. He said, yes, that angel came to me too and, saved me too. So it was kind of like one of those things where in certain circumstances, certain beings will come to protect you when there's, uh-oh, you're not supposed to know about this, and somebody else overheard a security breach, basically. So that was another benevolent thing. And there was things that happened in my childhood too that I only became aware of later through my parents that I won't go into detail now, but I will say that it confirmed the presence of Jesus Christ early on in such a way that he left physical evidence that confirmed not only his presence and his protection, but something that helped me with faith later on in life that proved beyond a shadow of a doubt, even at an age like 22 or 23, when I had a profound Christ intervention of, I'm just going to call it the realization of my eternal spirit in Christ that has always been, always is, and always will be. But it came through the grace, through faith in the truth of Jesus Christ in the Bible, who was the true one. But he was showing me in the way that I could receive something so profound that all the ways that I went around the block with, I did shamanism, I did channeling, I did Buddhism, I did tantric practice, I did dream yoga, I did almost everything except black magic. But I was involved with people who were, and I didn't realize they were like evil sorcerers, and then getting into bad woo-woo trouble with sorcerers who were trying to kill me. And then I had interventions from others saving me from like the black magicians who were trying to kill me. So it was the power of Christ. And really, I just feel that I've been protected, even though bad things have happened, but I've been protected all along through this, maybe in some way that I feel is connected to a destiny that I'm going to tell the truth no matter what. And it's complicated, and it's not a black and white picture, and that there's a whole difference of many kinds of beings that may take different forms that interact with us. So I just think what's important is who we are and connecting on a deeper level of our own eternal spirit, connected to a moral spiritual compass, like an ethical moral compass of true essential goodness that would be like Jesus said, well, those of the Father recognize me. Those who are of the Father recognize me and accept me because they recognize the Father in me. It's like intuitive, like the deeds and the actions and the intuitive truth of like seeing things for what they are and doing things, and also calling a viper, or in today's world, we'd be like, that's friggin' reptilian. Like we would know based on their behavior. So I believe that it's innate in us to know and recognize that inside of us, when we have that essential goodness that just knows. But it may take us a while to get it, because God, look how I'm like grandparent age now. So it's taken me a long time to really come to a fuller understanding of myself and all these things, and trying to have let's say, a fuller understanding, and not being so black and white, but also recognizing clearly when something ain't right or is causing harm. I'm going to nip it in the bud as soon as I can. And so this is where, if I'm going to put on the therapist hat, once again, I will say that the saving grace that actually helped me recover from understanding trauma and how it affects you and your relationships and your everything was understanding the dynamics of narcissistic abuse and what they call narcissistic personality disorder, and how that operates even within the more supernatural overtones of, let's say, this ain't just psychological. We're seeing something like reptilian hosts. Okay. We're seeing demonic behavior. We're seeing people who are appearing human, who have abandoned their true spiritual connection, where something dark has taken over and is operating through them. Sometimes nowadays they call them NPCs or whatever, but I think it could be a whole continuum of what's happening. So I don't want to make it like demonizing all these people who might have trauma, because a lot of people have trauma and they're just like staying in trauma. It doesn't mean they're evil, right? But there are some who are fully not human in their behaviors and their intentions and their effects and their choices to not change and to take on a non-human whatever. And that may take on different forms that we see clairvoyantly for people who are perceptive. So this is where the David Icke material and a lot of the things that we talked about on a lot of my other shows are like how we see it in our third eye, or we saw this, we saw that, we saw an entity, but it may take many forms and it can change its shape. So it can be very, very deceptive in manipulating our perception. So that's why our consciousness, our refining of consciousness and perception is so important within even trauma recovery, and how we may refine and redefine our understanding of even the alien or the ET narrative, or how we're perceiving their interacting even with UFOs and with craft. In fact, we also know, you mentioned before, oh, we saw an orb come in our room, for example, or we might have seen a craft fly over our house, or oh, well, or an orb that disappeared, or lights that, went together into one and shot off, or there's many things that we see, even helicopters. Okay, so many of these beings and these technologies can create, oh, well, you saw a helicopter. Well, guess what? It wasn't a helicopter. It was a UFO, or it was a UFO pretending to be a helicopter coming through a portal to enter into our reality, and it ain't even a helicopter or a military plane. So they can manipulate our perception or whatever. And it could be a real craft. In other words, they're not just messing with your head, seeing something fake. That's not there. There's a real craft that's physically there that can make you see like a real UFO or a craft or whatever and really come through our dimension into 3D. So that's where, it's much more than we're just seeing things. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Well, regarding your perception, have you ever seen something akin to a screen image?
Oh, yeah. This is interesting. Oh, there's so many. I remember when I was doing support groups, even in after I moved out of I was still in Southern California. So let's say I was doing a support group at that time. It was after my divorce where I had moved. And there were, because they would always have milab conversations. And so sometimes before or after the meeting, then they would interfere, right? They would like psychically attack you or try to come in. And I don't know if this happened after a meeting. I believe it happened after a support group meeting. And then they tried to enter into my consciousness. They were faking an alien gray. So they're trying to fake that alien gray came in to visit. And then they did it through this weird, um, let's say, it almost looked 2D, two-dimensional. So it was like a rectangular screen-like thingy that appeared to shape like it would be 3D, but it was really 2D. And it was a picture of a gray on it. And they were trying to enter into my consciousness to make me think this gray came into my room. And I'm like, that's a bunch of fake shit if I've ever seen anything. And I thought that was like, what are they doing? Making me think. And it wasn't even an alien gray. It was making me think it was by inserting it wasn't even holographic. It was almost like a 2D holographic thing that you see in your third eye. So that was like an example of how they did a screen memory. But I had seen so many things that I realized later were, oh my God, so much telepathic imagery sent in mind files between people who are assets, who have these abilities, and they do these things under the control or direction of their handlers in these projects to make us perceive things that we think are psychic predictions. Let's say like an event will happen. And then they send these mind files that go out like you'd send an email with a file in it and has a picture. And then they send it psychically to all these different people. And that's their job, right? And then the mind file will have a symbolic representation of an event that would be a bad event, like like an attack on a certain governmental building that's very famous. And then make you think, oh, I'm getting a psychic impression that this is going to happen. And so that you tell everybody that, oh, I think this is going to happen. And then it's just like a big, oh, they're just trying to get everybody to think they're receiving these psychic, prophetic images of, somebody being attacked on this particular date. And you're getting all these catastrophic images. And then it's like, oh, well, that's another program that they're put, you know? So they'll do that too, so that you think, oh, you're getting these messages of all these things that are going to happen in the future. And it's like, oh, this is going to get attacked in this event. And then it's like all eventitis, drama to get us to think that we're receiving all these images and need to warn people. So that's another little program. Oh my God. So I can't tell you all the stories that I've heard and more than my own personal experiences, but if there's one thing I could bring across that would, oh, help us to have more maybe more courageous compassion for one another who are having these experiences, that when we come together and we want to share, like so many have had to keep silent, or we feel like this is happening to us alone and nobody will believe us. And then that you can't talk. Like, let's say if it's a malevolent being who's messing with us, they try to prevent you to connect with others, to share information and get the human needs that you need to have met, to share and to feel understood and connect and, reflect, so that, like, is this real? Like, are you having this experience too? Or like, are they making me try to believe that it's this, that, or the other? Like, are you experiencing this too? And sometimes it's anecdotal. And then you figure out all this stuff that they've been doing. So they'll put, let's say you want to talk to somebody and you want to go to a support group or go to a conference or talk to a researcher because something ain't right that's happening, okay? Or it's a malevolent being because they're punishing you, doing all this shit. Then they'll present sometimes they could present the researcher's image or another person, maybe in a support group, and they may do things to make you think it's them coming to you, or a sexual scenario, or a love bitey thing, or to make you afraid of them, or to make you think you're getting real psychic remote viewing images that this person is like a horrible person doing bad shit. And then it's all like they're messing with you to make you think bad shit, or worse, spread rumors about these psychic things you're getting about someone else that is like not even true, like a demonic thing. And then just to avoid expressing and learning and sharing truth, or just what's going on. So they would do this early on, where we figured out, oh, they were stopping people from coming to the support group. They get sick or they have a fight with their spouse, so they cut your phone off so you couldn't get phone calls, or they cut your email off and hack whatever. They just do all these things to prevent us from coming together to share. But then they would want to control the narrative too, so that, certain people can control the narrative with big YouTube followings who would talk about certain aspects of disclosure, where ET's good, military bad, or all ET's bad, all humans good, military helping us. Or they would always try to define the narrative. And the ones that had the biggest followings tended to be the ones that they wanted you to believe, to distract you with, so that you wouldn't maybe find out some of the other like little things that would get shadow banned or tend to be marginalized. So that's why it's always good to share and to learn and to, have compassion, because sometimes we can be thrown a curveball of bullshit. Excuse my French. I shouldn't say French, but they could cause us to think we're remote viewing something that's accurate, and then and then you find out it's wrong. You find out they lied, or they give you a false psychic prediction, or oh my God, then you feel really stupid that you think you're a good psychic, and you're like, they're just messing with you, you know? I'm sorry to say it, but I had to say that, I
Well, regarding the narrative at least, and the, uh, the big conferences, I won't get into any names, but do you believe that like all the real stories out there, they're not really being uh, shown or told to the public? And because I've had a lot of people on that, these stories are real, but they're not really like mainstream at least. And so it saddens me a bit that they're not getting the airtime they deserve.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's how it has always been. When you, I don't know, I think it's anything very positive and good can also be shadow banned. And anything like really dark and nefarious where they're controlling and manipulating, definitely shadow banned and cut off for murder. I mean, they'll keep a lot of secrets to the point of murder, and we know that for a fact. So, but there's even positive things that I think they want us to stay away from, that I believe miracles are happening around us more often than not. And there are benevolent beings who are helping through. I believe it's angelic that happens through Christ, that there are benevolent helpers that are always helping to those who are pure and good and want to connect to the truth and have a love for the truth beyond all. Their love for the truth is very strong. So, and there's also something I want to mention about there seems to be an attack on, of course, people who would perceive truth on, let's say, both those levels or the continuum, like something that's really, really good and positive and powerful, or something that's really dark and bad and powerful, and try to control or kill people who have perception and pure perception of either of those or both of those, or a continuum. Okay, because there's very good and there's very evil operating in this world. Face it, and there's us that may have a whole range, but there are those who are unique in their memory and their purity of perception, which I call original memory of beingness, that is beyond current body, personality, lifetime, or their perception is so honed in that they perceive beyond the archetypal manipulation of perception that takes place through these very high level evil, which some people name, sometimes call, oh, the demiurge, or I call it the counterfeit spirit, or the adversary, or the devil, or Lucifer, or Nathaniel Gillis has this thing where he calls it the proto-intelligence, which is very deceptive and works through these occult secret society, this and that. But really, it is what it is, and it may go through different appearances. But that which manipulates our perception to believe that which is not innately true. So if when we have original awareness of our original beingness in the eternal spirit of God, then we may become under more attack by those forces which wants to blind that light and that fire of original beingness that remembers and perceives more clearly. So we could say the people who have this innate perceptual memory of clarity, which is very lucid, but unpopular, because I would say that the people that I've interacted with who tend to have a larger dose of this original memoryness, beingness, and clarity, lucidity, but goodness, are attacked, and more so. And it's almost like they know who you are before you know who you are, and they could attack you all throughout your life. Um, like a spark, it's a certain spark. So that's why I think my strategy for what could be the solution to, the lies and what makes us perceive lies, because when we believe a lie, we exchange it for the truth, which hides and disconnects us more from the power of God that works through us to protect us and help us see clearly. So it's like it's even subconscious. So it's very, very subtle, even in language and in symbols. Symbols and language can be a route of how they manipulate perception, even in our dreams. So this is why lucidity, or aware of being aware in various states of consciousness, is very helpful practice to start observing, yeah, more clearly. And then we can see, for example, in meditation, how we observe our thoughts. That's like one of the practices. You just observe the thoughts coming in, or the sensations, or the feelings, and we are the observer. We're not the thoughts. We don't identify with the thoughts. We identify as the observer. So once we know our real identity as observer beyond even this incarnational life or personality, we can have more power over that which may interfere with our true identity and memory, and manipulate our perception and get us caught up in the non-lucidity of this drama, right? It's a non-lucid theater in this life. So we become lucid in our dreaming and our living. So be seeing beyond the theater of the whole, what do they call it? Plato's cave thing, where they see the shadows on the wall and the non-lucidity of the shadows playing. Then we become the observers to know it is a theater. Okay, so when we could see them before they arise, because we could feel them before they come. We could feel the thoughts before they arise. So this is where the perception, when we can hone our perception, then we can bypass the roadblocks that they may set before us, if they're malevolent, for example. Then it's like, oh, you got the upper hand. You're like an eagle. You're soaring over and you see the landscape and you see where the road comes and where it goes. So that's where we have an advantage over a roadblock that may be set before us, so they won't get a flat tire. But I will say that there's a benevolent God, if you will, I believe, that has led me all along and been with me to to help me so that I don't fall into the unnecessary traps and unnecessary suffering or unnecessary abusive relationships, which we tend to, I mean, this whole love bite thing, I mean, a lot of the people that come to me now is like, oh my God, I got this, it's narcissistic love bite, twin flame thing going on. And it's like really throwing me over the edge here because it can throw you over the edge. So, and that's how I think they get us is through the love in our heart and our so just learning how to be perceptive to that so that we protect our heart but still can operate with authentic compassion but courageousness and learning, like nipping it in the bud when we sense that predator because we know now what it is. We could recognize it because the hairs on our arms are going up and we got that. You just know, right? Before they come, that feeling. Then you know how to avoid. You actually can move around it. Now we can move around it so we don't get abducted anymore. So part of a Christian path that I've taken is they don't take me anymore like they used to, but they do interact in ways that they can, if they can get in a certain way. And then so when I get, let's say, in a real funk and I'm like depressed and feeling crappy and getting in a bad mood, feeling all negative, hey, it happens, right? And then sometimes, oh, well, they entered into my consciousness. I saw them come. They tried to come into my dreams. I was in a funk that night, or I watched a movie and entered in through a Netflix or entered in through a bad movie. And then you could start perceiving, oh, it entered in this doorway, it entered here, it entered there. Well, that I could work on that. And so you start to see how things enter in and how they operate because that perception now shows you what's operating in and through people. And this is where the people that I've interviewed for years, like a gal named Marit from Finland, who worked through all her abductions and got really lucid in her dreams and, just got more and more perceptive to integrate the dissociated parts that were held captive by some of these beings who were part of the aliens, right? Then she was able to bypass the abductions altogether and start perceiving reality on a different level. So, and it's not that these aliens aren't true and the abductions don't happen and our perception in the world is not true. But as we refine our awareness and start working more powerfully with our spirit, eternal spirit, and with God, I think, then our perception may change on how it interacts with us. Yeah.
Regarding your dad, the fact that he worked for Lockheed and was
God.
a Freemason,
Yeah.
you believe that because of that, you automatically became a participant to a certain program. Because the name Sierra Neblina comes to mind regarding her father when that was military, um, and because of that, yeah, she was taken also. So I'm wondering if that might have happened to you.
Well, I believe definitely that was a significant part of a ladder. It's almost like something's already in the bloodline. And then if events are manipulated such that, let's say, a marriage is successful, and then two people get married, and then they have children, and then one partner gets involved in the Freemasonry, even sometimes it's before a child is born or after a child or around that time, then it locks in greater supernatural power that gives permission over, now that they have given permission as a parent to give their children over to the spiritual force that might work with um, a military industrial complex, Freemasonry, occult secret society, controlled corporation, and then their secret projects. So I believe the abductions happen earlier with aliens and certain beings that then they can lock it in through through another oath, like it's usually a blood oath that's made with a close family member. And then you're under that blood oath as property to further be used. So I think they get some people because there might be something that happened ancestrally even before. Then they could lock in more power by a later addition through a Freemasonry, then a military industrial complex. Then they can get you in a more human operated, unacknowledged special access project, which may include liaisons with certain ET groups that are already in liaison with the powers that had made alliances. So in this case, let's say a milab thing, it would be probably more under the, the reptilian, Draco, or whatever ones that have made alliances with the groups and secret societies through those alliances. But I believe that there's a mixed bag here. There's many different projects, let's say, where humans got involved on certain levels, even in, many sectors of society, and maybe they're just a scientist, or they're just somebody in the military, or the government, and they don't know they're under authority. They're under their property. They don't know they're already property that's working under the alliance of these could be fallen angelics and Azazel, for example, some of the fallen angels that work specifically through high-level Freemason or other secret societies. They have many names that it could be the same one. So they're under their authority. So but they may not be aware of it. So they may be working in projects, think this project's good and it has this particular agenda, and they may not even know. They're just scientists or just military. And then they may not know that, oh, they're involved as in this project, and they're abducting kids or they're experimenting on them so that they'll have super abilities to be used as assets in time travel and X, Y, and Z. And a lot of it is dark, though, I have to say, and they would want to keep this secret because in these projects, most of them are trauma-based mind control in some capacity that utilizes the trauma splits and the control and programming that happens through the trauma splits to make them accessible through a lot of advanced technology that is way beyond what we even thought was possible. That is going into these super soldier programs, for example. So, yeah.
Okay. Um, Now, coming back to the love bites setup thing, are you aware if people being set up by the program can be like switched off the next day? Like one day there's total love within a family, a couple, and the next day they're switched off.
Oh, yeah. They do it all the time. Switch them on, switch them off. And yeah, I mean, I've had people report that to me. And it can happen suddenly where they switch them off and they no longer need them, or they could switch them off to create the what we call the unrequited love, the yearning of the unrequited love after someone's been psychically switched off from you and they suddenly have no more feelings for you and you're just totally in love and you're feeling this soul connection, which really is a soul connection because they actually might have merged your heart chakra energy, literally. So a lot of times you have this complete merging in almost in their soul, and that's why it's so strong. But to go back to we have become aware of through many researchers and experiencers that they believe there are augmented technologies that work in conjunction with what I believe is like the classic old-fashioned sorcery, black magic, mind control, hypnosis that can cause people's behaviors to suddenly change and them not know that they're being manipulated to, um, you know, wake up in a bad mood and get in a fight with their spouse or something. And so people can be turned and used against one another through technologies that can entrain their consciousness. So this is something that has been done probably more recently with technologies through certain companies I won't mention that they can do this where they split up marriages and families and can cause so much harm in relationships where people they just don't know, so that sometimes you don't know until after the fact that this kind of thing has been going on. So the best thing you can do is just have faith in God and the truth and goodness, continue a good life of connection. I do this through prayer and singing and the ways that work for me. so that the power of prayer and actually requesting angelic assistance through the power of our authority in Christ really what works, so that when these things are a problem, we can ask and request angelic assistance to help with the interference factors to, like, say, manipulate people around us. And this happens in like gang stalking. We hear about this whole gang stalking targeting thing. And of course, they did this long ago, even before we even called it a name, even before we called it gang stalking and targeting. We knew this was happening in abductees and UFO researchers and all kinds of people trying to get the truth out about all kinds of things. And then suddenly, people would turn against them and they were friends, and then they did a 180 on them, and then they lost their job, and then all this shit happened. And you're like, wow. But this has been going on a long time. So, but I believe that we can have help. But in my walk with Christ, I didn't know until I've started deepening my connection and what we call deliverance, liberation, and renunciation prayers, and getting more and more connected with our authentic relationship with Christ so that we really become tuned in with what I call the Holy Spirit, which is the Spirit of truth that can come and work with us and in us to discern, so that that comes to our assistance, so that we're not walking this path alone and always doing it alone and fighting it alone. And we actually have assistance working with us to help us. And sure enough, I mean, I've seen people make exposés who, let's say, they were former Satanists and they were former witches, and in these secret societies or whatever, where they were actually, their job was to attack certain people or certain churches or certain people who had really powerful faith, or people who were bringing influential, positive, spiritual hope, and people who are really positive, right? That they were actually tasked to target and hurt people, or people who were instructed and paid by government people to target certain groups, so that they never got into conferences where they were bad mouthed and shadow banned. So that now there's people coming forward who actually will admit that they were tasked to target, attack, or kill or neutralize certain people. So, hey, there's so many people coming out who are telling the truth and risking their lives to do so. Yeah,
Yeah, I know.
yeah.
Um, so let's talk about your two books. The Love Bite, Alien Interference in Human Love, Relationships, and The Dark Side of Cupid, Love Affairs, The Supernatural, and Energy Vampirism. Now, I know you can buy them on Amazon, but the first edition for of Alien Love Bite, it's hard to find. You said earlier on that there's a second edition coming out.
I'm working on actually the second edition of The Dark Side of Cupid, which is the second book, is already out and available, hard copy and Kindle, as well as other digital versions. So that has additional material, which is really, really good. So that's now available. And then The Love Bite, I'm still working on to get the second edition out, hopefully late fall, with additional material as well. So this, because I got pirated really bad, and I still actually have some copies of the original, that if somebody wants it that bad they can get it through me, but it's hard for me to do the work because I have so much on my plate. I would rather them wait to get the really good edition. If they could wait until fall, you could still get the Kindle, which is inexpensive. And then I also have a Italian version of the second edition Dark Side of Cupid, which should be out in the fall, that we're working on now. And I did this because the work of Dr. Corrado Malanga really aligned a lot with what I learned in terms of the interference factor and how they operate. And so there was a number of Italians who were very interested in this, who actually had, one guy had written a book that was similar to the relationship manipulation Dark Cupid thing, but it's nothing compared to the real, I'm calling it the original book. So I wanted to make sure I get this out in Italian so that they have a reference to the original work that connects with Dr. Corrado Malanga, and also my own work that takes into consideration the vampire effect, and then the complex trauma recovery effect, and all the beings that are involved in this and how they operate and how to become free. And this actually goes back to, I know I'm going off on a task here, but believe the French Cathars, remember in medieval France, who were just completely murdered in horrible ways. Like when you consider the Inquisition, how long that went on, with the hijack, of course, of Christianity, of the Roman Vatican in particular. There's always a hijack of something original. And so when we have the hijack of something original and good, it may take many, many forms, but the original is still existing out there through Christ, by the way. So what I saw this as in some of the ancient Gnostic writings in the Nag Hammadi library, which included some of the Gospels, which were not put on the canonized Bibles. So they kind of breadcrumbed us on some of this stuff, but I think the Cathars knew it, right? And that's why they got rid of them. But they knew something called the counterfeit spirit, which I kind of mentioned before. In the biblical terms, they also call it the adversary, which was the one that always sought to steal, kill, and destroy. But the counterfeit spirit is really the same, but there's more of a descriptive identifier of it with the original Gnostics that is making itself known today more profoundly with the ability to hijack, copy, erase identity, vampirize, and try to copy and control what an original is. And its operating program is narcissistic abuse of the highest order. So when we can recognize the operating program and behavior of the counterfeit spirit, which is really the same as the adversary, but it's much more descriptive because now when we know and identify it, we know immediately what it is. And now that we know what it is and have the discernment, we know what the counter measure for that through Christ and what is original. So I believe that which is original is much more simple and that and pure. And I think this is what the Cathars probably represented and was such a threat in the medieval ages. That's why they wanted to get rid of them so bad, because there was a type of purity and power that existed. And it still exists today, probably in small numbers of people who are actually witnessing miracles all the time, and they're actually have profound faith and a transformation of their mind and their spirit through real Christ, not the fake. And I just wanted to say that because I know that there is fakes out there and there's fake Jesuses. And then there's, people who've been abused where they do the fake Jesus and the fake this and the fake that. And they lose all their faith in everything. And then they think everything is evil and there's no hope. And this is a matrix prison and you're never going to get out. And then it goes into this like negative spiral of belief systems. And I want to avoid that trap, and I don't discount evil exists and the trap exists, but there is something good and there is something greater that we can connect with, that we are from, that we are from that, and that we can strengthen that. And so that we focus on that goodness and that victory that exists in us all the time now, and never forget, so that we won't get caught off on this spiral of negativity and hopelessness. And because that a lot of narratives are going that way in the conspiracy field, okay? So that is just a danger of what happens when you realize, if you've been in a complex trauma family and all this like bad stuff has happened, and you realize all this evil and these high levels of power, right? And then you start to think it's all evil. And not everything is evil, and there is good happening, and there's miracles happening all the time. And just to never forget that there's something good that you can have faith in that will work with you, and just never lose that hope and that goodness. Yeah.
Beautiful. To finish off the interview, Eve, do you have perhaps a closing statement or a final story that you might want to get out?
Um, Goodness me. Well, I wanted to interview a new person who had more information on the whole hybrid situation of basically many people are being targeted in a horrible way with extreme narcissistic behaviors, um, gang stalking behaviors, and they're being hurt so bad, so they can't tell the truth, and having a hard time healing from trauma. And I just want them to know that it's possible to heal from trauma even if you can't necessarily tell your story, you could still heal and recognize it by, I found that the key was understanding narcissistic abuse and understanding the operation of the counterfeit spirit on a supernatural level, and then connecting to the true original essence that is good, God, Christ, eternal spirit, that once we do that connection, we can heal and we can have that power to heal and just not lose hope. I think a lot of people lose their hope, and I just don't like to see that, even if people get murdered. It doesn't mean that a truth that they might have shared, like let's say, or my predecessor before me was murdered for their work, but it doesn't mean that they're going to kill every truth teller and that what they had to share is not important, and to not lose hope that you can't tell the truth. Yeah.
Well, I'm so glad that you had these positive experiences, because the media tends to focus so much on the negative, and there's so much bad out there. So I'm glad you had these good contacts and then the fact that you shared with us today. And so I've had loads of fun today, Eve, and truthfully, you're an amazing person. So thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thank you. Thank you for listening.
And to those watching, hope you enjoyed today's interview. I'm your host, Mr. Great. More interviews coming up, and I will see you guys next time. So take care, everyone. Hello, everyone. This is Mr. Great, and thanks for watching today's episode. If you are an abductee, contactee, or experiencer, and you believe that your story could help others, please feel free to contact me through my YouTube channel email. When it comes to experiencers, the ET phenomena, and the future, remember, truth will out.